If you don't know about flyer deals on Instacart, this message is for you. Flyer deals are like strolling through your favorite store looking for deals, but you're scrolling your phone, and maybe you're in bed. Because getting delivery doesn't mean you have to miss deals like you'd get at the store, like the one creamer that doesn't make your stomach hurt, or the pasta sauce you can't not buy when it's on sale. So download the Instacart app, shop flyers, and never miss a deal on one of your favorites. Plus, get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes.
Hey, ghoul friend, it's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I want to ask you to wish Susto a happy birthday. As we celebrate the upcoming 5th anniversary of Susto and its dedication to exploring the rich tapestry of Latin American and Hispanic folklore, I invite you to join me in taking this paranormal project to the next level. Over the past 5 years, I've delved deep into the mysterious realms of ghostly apparitions, supernatural legends, and chilling tales that have captivated audiences worldwide. Now, as I embark on the next chapter of this journey into the unknown, I need your support to enhance your experience as a listener. Your generous donation will allow me to invest in a new recording setup, ensuring that future spine-chilling narratives are captured with crystal ball clarity and devilish detail. With upgraded equipment, I'll be able to host ghoulish guests with greater ease and transport you even deeper into the heart of darkness, where legends come alive and the paranormal awaits. Every dollar contributed will aid in advancing the quality of Susto, enabling me to continue preserving and sharing the enchanting folklore of Latin American and Hispanic cultures with the world. Join me in celebrating 5 years of fear-inducing tales and help me amplify this spooky saga for many more to come. Together, we can unlock the secrets of the supernatural and keep the spirit of storytelling alive. To make a donation, you can visit gofund.me/10bcdc27. Thank you for your support, and may the spirits guide you on your journey through the unknown. Eternally yours, Adrian or Ayden. Either way. Hey ghoul friends, it's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of ooky, spooky, scary stories. Welcome back, and thank you for being here. If this is your first time, don't be shy, we don't bite that hard. Y'all, what a month May has been so far. This month, it creeped up on me, to be honest. I did not expect to be as busy as I have been this month, and I say it every time, very excited about it, very grateful. The Psychic and Spirit Fest, hosted by Curious Twins over in San Antonio, was such a fun event. I had such a great time speaking to the crowd, and I got such a positive response, so that was very exciting for me to hear. If I met you there and you were listening now, thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for speaking to me if you did. It was so fun to meet all ghoul friends, old and new, in person at that event, and to have just an amazing time overall. Aside from that, you may have seen, if you're following me on social media, that's at Susto Podcast on every social media platform. I posted about speaking at a career day at an elementary school here in Austin. I talked about it in a TikTok as well. That was something very new I have never done before. After doing that, they just happened to line up perfectly. But after that, I went to speak to a group of high school students in San Antonio, and that was also amazing. It was so much fun to speak to varying age groups. Of course, the little kids are just kind of interested in how everything looks and sounds, and the high school students were really engaged with some amazing questions. And so just kind of talking to them about creating and performing and stuff like that was such a good time. So thank you to everyone for inviting me out to do these things. It's so much fun. I talk about it constantly about how much I love doing in-person events. So keep them coming. If you all are ever curious or wondering, I don't know if he would say yes, or if it would be appropriate, or if it would work or whatever, just ask me and I will find a way to make it work, because again, I love doing in-person things like that. Thank you to everybody who voted for the Best of Austin. We are waiting for results. We will hear about those, I think, mid to late June. So fingers crossed. It is in the universe's hands now. We all did our parts. Thank you so much for that. We'll keep our eyes peeled for that one. I don't have too many other updates for today. I'm going to, like I mentioned in the last episode about curanderismo, I want to dive a little bit deeper into each of the curanderos that I mentioned on that episode. And so today we are going to start with the story of Don Pedrito Jaramillo.
Hey, what's up? I'm Charlie.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are Believing the Bizarre,
a paranormal podcast that dives into the unknown and the unusual every Tuesday.
We discuss hauntings, cryptids, aliens, UFO encounters, conspiracies, and more.
And we break down whether or not we find them believable.
All right, listen, if you're not paying for electricity, you're not paying for dinner.
Saw a terrifying looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes.
Almost reached it when the laughter stopped suddenly, and a sound behind me made me turn around.
Sorry, I was gonna do it, but then I had SpaceX.
So we got you covered, whether you like horror or laughs, or both. We actually really hope it's both.
With over 3 million downloads, you'll be joining a bizarro community that we promise is more than just Mothman and our parents.
We even take creepy stories from our listeners and turn them into episodes.
Check out Believing the Bizarre on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Believing the Bizarre, a podcast as bizarre as you are.
Here lie the remains of Pedro Jaramillo, the benefactor of humanity. Born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, died at Paisanos, Starr County, Texas, July 3, 1907. This is the epitaph written in Spanish on a small stone in the front of a cross that marks the grave of an old Mexican faith healer in a small cemetery near Falfurrias in South Texas, in what is now known as Brooks County. Pedro Jaramillo came to visit this part of Texas from Mexico in 1881. His interest in the locality developed through a friend in Mexico who knew this country. He first came in the company of some men who were bringing liquors to Las Cabras Ranch of Don Andres Canelas, where a celebration was to be held on St. John's Day, June 24th, which was a festival that was widely celebrated on Mexican ranches in those days. This gave Don Pedro an opportunity to see the country. He went back to Mexico only to return and settle at Los Olmos Ranch. He announced himself as a curandero, a healer, and settled in the neighborhood of present-day Falfurrias. At that time, there was only one doctor between Corpus Christi and Laredo in San Diego. Even so, the Mexican people felt more comfortable consulting a curandero. He claimed that God bestowed on him the power to heal the sick, to say which prescription, given in the name of God and executed with faith, had power to heal. He claimed no healing power of himself. Rather, his mission was to help the sick through their faith in God's power to heal them. He did not charge for the prescriptions. The patients gave whatever they cared to, or nothing at all. Nevertheless, what the people gave voluntarily was sufficient for Don Pedro, who himself often gave to the poor and the sick who came to him. For himself, he wanted only enough for his very frugal living. He thought that since God had bestowed on him the power to heal humanity, he could also take that power away from Jaramillo if he used it for his own benefit. Don Pedro related that when he was a poor laborer in Mexico, working for half a bushel of corn and the equivalent of $5 a month, he suffered an affliction of the nose. One night, he said he was suffering so much that he went out into the woods to a pool of water. He lay down and buried his face in the mud at the edge. This relieved him. He stayed there treating himself with the mud. At the end of 3 days, he was well, but his nose remained disfigured. This disfiguration of the nose is always associated with the gift of healing that is credited to Don Pedrito. He returned to his house and lay down and slept. After a while, a voice awakened him and told him that he had received from God the gift of healing. At the same time, the voice told him that his master was sick and that he had the power to cure him. Don Pedro got up and went to his master. He prescribed the first thing that came into his mind. In this case, the prescription was a tepid bath daily for 3 days. His master followed this prescription and recovered. Thus began the work of this curandero. At his new home on Los Olmos Creek, his work began among the families at Los Olmos Ranch and the neighboring ranches. It grew to a marvelous extent until it finally covered hundreds of square miles. His practice lasted a full 25 years. During the first years, it was very difficult to contact a great many of the people. Only through long, hard trips could it be done. At this time, Don Pedrito made trips on horseback far from his home, sometimes accompanied by a friend. He would go to Corpus Christi, San Antonio, and Laredo. He would stop at intermediate points, and in this manner he saw thousands of people who were sick and wanted his help. On one of these trips to San Antonio, it is said the crowd became so great that the police were called. The doctors took notice and made an investigation to see by what authority Don Pedrito practiced. They found that they could do nothing to stop him because he made no charges for his prescriptions. When Don Pedrito went away on a trip, he left at home groceries to feed the people who came from a distance and waited for his return. These groceries were brought by wagon and team from the town of Alice 40 miles away. When his work was well established, a grocery merchant said he would buy $400 or $500 worth of groceries at a time. This merchant also said that Don Pedrito was the only customer he had who bought an entire barrel of cube sugar in one order. He would sometimes prescribe the sugar and furnish the patient with the remedy. He kept the groceries in a lumber room built for that purpose and called it the store. But nothing was sold. Where need existed, food was given. One of his friends, Don Antonio Hinojosas, gave him a present of 100 acres of land. This he developed into a farm. He fenced it, put a small house and a well on it, and set someone to work it. Here he raised corn, watermelons, gourds, peppers, garbanzos, and garlic. Whatever came off the farm went into Don Pedrito's work. What the curandero received with one hand, he gave away with the other. When Don Pedrito had been at Los Olmos about 10 years, a terrible drought visited the country. It began in 1893 and lasted several years. Don Albino Canales, son of Don Andres Canales and Las Cabras Ranch, who was a small boy at the time, says that Don Pedrito practically fed the northern part of then Star County. Don Pedrito employed people to help work his land and to look after and help those who came for healing. At times, there would be as many as 500 people camped on Los Olmos Creek waiting for the return of Don Pedrito. Some came for miles on foot, others on horseback, others in wagons and buggies, and entire families might come bringing one sick member. When Don Pedrito was at home, he would go into his jacal or hut and sit at a table where his employee directed the people who visited before him. Don Pedrito knew the nature of their sickness whether they shared it or not. He was credited with having clairvoyance as well as psychic abilities. When he gave the prescription, sometimes orally, sometimes written down, the patient would place what they cared to give on the table. To some patients, the curandero would say, "No, keep your money. You need it for your trip home." Or again, he would say, "No, return it to whom you borrowed it from." In this way, he dispatched the people easily and quickly. After Don Pedrito had lived at Los Olmos for some time, a post office was established there with the name of Paisano. The mail was first brought by a mail carrier on horseback. Later, it came by stagecoach on the run from Alice to Brownsville. Then, much of Don Pedrito's work was done by mail. In the many letters he received, sometimes as many as 200 a week were enclosed stamps or money. Of the stamps, there were enough for the replies, and finally, enough to fill a large box. The register of the post office showed that many letters were sent out, but that the stamps sold were not equal in number to the letters mailed. For this reason, an investigation was made from the post office department in Washington. The investigator was not convinced until he saw the amount of stamps that Don Pedrito had collected at his house. When the railroad reached the new town of Alfurias in 1903, 20 years after Don Pedrito had come to Los Olmos and only 4 years before his death, many sick people came on the train. A man at Los Olmos established the business of transporting the people back and forth the 4 miles between the railroad station at Alfurias and Don Pedrito's home at Los Olmos. This man had 4 vehicles that at times made 3 or 4 trips a day, bringing the people to get prescriptions and taking those away who had been prescribed for. The work of this curandero was not confined to his own people. He prescribed for many of the Americans, and all those who knew him and his work were convinced that he was a good man, charitable and sincere, one who believed that he had a God-given mission to perform and dedicated all his time, efforts, and money to that end. Nevertheless, his work caused him to meet with disapproval by some doctors and officers of the places he visited. It is said that he was suspected in Mexico and at one time put in jail there, but the charge against him of being a brujo was not strong enough to justify his being held. The late Dr. J.S. Strickland, who knew Don Pedrito better than any other doctor in the country, who covered the same territory he did, and who no doubt treated the same patients at times when neither knew it, said that Don Pedrito was a smart but uneducated man, and that he did perform wonderful cures. When someone suggested to Dr. Strickland that the curandero be prohibited from doing his work, he was quoted as saying, "No, how do I know that Don Pedrito's prayers don't do more good than my pills?" One Father Bard was located some 50 miles from Don Pedrito, who was within the priest's parish, when one of his altar boys, Lafayette Wright, was inclined to make light of Don Pedrito and his remedies. Father Bard reproved him. He explained that God, knowing of the great need of the people where there were so few doctors, saw fit to bestow on this humble man the power of helping them. He had endowed him for the work, and the servant fulfilled his vocation faithfully. It can be said that there has never been another so honored and appreciated among the Mexican people of South Texas as this curandero, this folk healer, Pedro Jaramillo. It can also be said that no one else in this part of the country, of whatever nationality, religion, economic, or social standing, has done through a lifetime as much to try to relieve human suffering as this man did through the 25 years that he lived in South Texas. He gave to his work the days of his life and the many thousands of dollars presented by those who felt that they had been helped through him. And now, over 100 years after his death, the Mexican people are holding this folk character, the benefactor of humanity, in still greater reverence as time passes. They regard him as a saint, an attitude he discouraged during his lifetime. He told his patients repeatedly, "I have no healing power. It is the power of God released through your faith which heals you." Today, pictures of Don Pedrito are placed among those of the saints in the homes of many Mexican people of South Texas, and small statues copied from his picture are kept in their homes too. Masses are often said for the repose of his soul in the churches of the region where many people still remember him, and in many homes, a place of honor is given to an enlarged picture of the curandero. A firm in Laredo that supplies curative herbs uses his picture and the trademark Don Pedrito. On All Souls Day in 1950, 70 years after he first came to Los Olmos Ranch, now a ghost ranch itself, people came for miles to visit his grave. They entered a cemetery of 25 graves through a gate over which is a placard written in Spanish. It reads, "A memorial to Don Pedrito Jaramillo from the Señor Cotres and his cooperators." Visitors kneel at his grave and pray. They say the rosary. They bring candles in glass containers with the figure of the Virgen de Guadalupe printed in colors on the glass to light and place at his grave. They bring wreaths of artificial flowers and statues. They bring other votive candles of many kinds. All is performed in fulfillment of vows made to the spirit of Don Pedrito or in supplication of his help in the spiritual world. His grave is covered with a roof supported by 4 posts. At one end is a narrow shelf on which are placed the lighted candles. At the other end is a placard with the announcement, dedicated by the Center of Psychological Studies, Love and Affection of McAllen, Texas, January 13, 1947. At the foot of the grave, a marble slab has been placed by a grateful follower. On it is engraved, "Pedro Jaramillo, in recompense of his miracle, I dedicate this stone to his memory." Welcome back, cool friends. So, right off the bat, the source that I used was a treasure trove, treasure chest, a gold mine, what have you. It was just the perfect source because it had all of this in one page, and it has what I'm going to go through next. But this is from Project Muse, the website. It's muse.jhu.edu. So it's an academic source. And this is from a book called The Healer of Los Olmos and Other Mexican Lore. And this entry, or I'm assuming this chapter, is called Don Pedrito Jaramillo, the Curandero of Los Olmos, published by the University of North Texas Press. And of course, the direct link for this will be in the Susto Google Doc for patrons. But again, you can search this. It's page 9 to 70 of this book. To continue, there were many. I didn't even count them. I want to say for sure at least 10 different accounts of people's encounters or experiences with Don Pedrito Jaramillo. And I pulled a couple of them so that I can read to you. If we did all of them, it would be just hours. But I did pull maybe like 3 or 4, and we're going to go through them. So the first one that I have here is called How Señora Tomasita de Canales Was Cured. It says, in the year 1889, Doña Tomasita, the wife of Don Andres Canales, which I believe was one of the people that was referenced, saying that he fed that northern part of Starr County during that really bad drought. That was the son of, I'm guessing, this woman. Yeah, it's the same people. So it says, in the year 1889, Doña Tomasita, the wife of Don Andres Canales, the owner of the well-known Las Cabras Ranch in Jim Wells County, became sick of a malignant fever. Señor Canales called a doctor from Corpus Christi, who came and prescribed medicines for her, but she grew no better. Then another doctor was sent for her from the same town. He attended her for a few days until he too confessed that he had done all he could, all that science prescribed, and that in his opinion there was no cure for the lady. Don Andres then suggested taking his wife to San Antonio, but the doctor said that she would not survive the trip from the ranch to Collins, which at that time was the nearest railroad station. The trip would have had to be made over a 25-mile unimproved road by a horse-drawn conveyance. Apparently, the rest of this story was written in a letter from a Judge Jose Canales of Brownsville. It says, while I was not present when my mother was sick, yet I have heard the account of her sickness and cure both from her own lips and from my father's, especially from my father, who was very accurate in his statements and who was not a believer in Don Pedro as a faith healer until this incident took place. My grandmother was alive and attending my mother during her sickness. My mother had lost consciousness. My 2 brothers, Albino and Andres, had been sent from Matamoros, where they were attending school, and my mother was unable to recognize them. When my grandmother was advised what the doctor had said, she suggested to my father that since the doctor had no hope for her recovery, and since my grandmother did have faith in Don Pedro Jaramillo's power to cure, my father should send a messenger to Los Olmos and ask Don Pedro for some recipe. This says receta. I'm guessing, for a remedy from him. This continues, my father consented and sent a cowboy there, and Don Pedro prescribed that she should be bathed in natural water or unheated water 3 times once every 2 hours. When this message came, the last doctor was returning to Corpus, and he said that if they bathed my mother in cold water, she would die. At that time, according to medical science, when a person had high fever, it was not considered safe to prescribe cold water as an antidote. You know that now doctors often prescribe cracked ice in such cases. So very different science back then. This continues, my mother was bathed in cold water according to the prescription sent by Don Pedro, and she survived the ordeal. The first bath was given late in the evening, and the others were given during the night. On the next morning, my mother was able to recognize my 2 brothers again. Don Pedro had sent word by the cowboy that he would come over to our ranch the following morning, which he did. When Don Pedro arrived the next day, my mother had recovered consciousness and was able to recognize and talk to him. I do not know how long it took her to recover or what other prescriptions were administered by Don Pedro. All I do know is that she got well, and when I came home from college, I found that my mother had lost all her hair as the result of the fever. Prior to this fever, my mother was of a slender physique, and after this fever, she began to put on flesh and continued to be rather stout in physique up to her death. It is true that my mother had a great deal of faith in Don Pedro, as you naturally would suppose, but it is not true that she never took other medicines or remedies except in the name of God and of Don Pedro. She was attended by other physicians, and while she was a very religious woman and a good Roman Catholic up to her death, she did not worship Don Pedro in the same sense indicated by some people. We revere the name of Don Pedro as we think he was God's instrument to save my mother from death at that time, and we still have an enlarged picture made from a Kodak which my mother ordered made. But we do not ascribe to Don Pedro any other power except the fact that we believe that he was one of God's humble instruments for good among our people, especially those who hold the true faith in Jesus Christ our Lord. That's one thing, and I know that Don Pedro felt the same. He felt like, I have no real power. I'm merely a vessel, an instrument. But I think that in itself is a power, being able to tap into, whether you want to call it God or the universe or nature, whatever name you might call it by, tapping into this higher power. I think that really is a power. And I think Don Pedro was a very humble man, and that's great. That's beautiful. We love that for him. But I do think he had, that in itself is a power. Something interesting that was also in here, Judge Canales wrote about his mother, was that he said it is not true that she never took other medicines or remedies. So like I had mentioned in the curanderismo episode, or if you were there for the presentation, that just because Latina people have access to faith healers or curanderes or brujes, that doesn't mean they're going to turn away from biomedical interventions or a doctor or medicine. That's reiterated here, that just she was a believer that Don Pedro was working via God, but she also still took her medicine and whatever prescribed from doctors, which I think is great and important. But just again, interesting to point out that this is a first person account of that. The next one that I have here, this one's short, and I thought it was kind of funny. This one says, yes, Jose, the young man who was feeding Norman Hoffman's fine horses at San Diego, Texas, said, I have heard a great deal about Don Pedro Jaramillo. He went on to say that his parents, who had lived near San Diego for many years, knew him well and depended on him to prescribe for any sickness they might have in the family. But the only remedy he prescribed that Jose could remember was a cup of water. He had cured them with that only. It appeared that Jose didn't care to mention the name of a woman in the family who had severe attacks of migraine headaches. When someone went to Don Pedrito to secure a remedy for her, he sent her word to have her head cut off and thrown to the hogs. When the woman was told what the curandero had prescribed, she became violently angry and didn't have any more headaches. I think that one was hilarious. Just thinking from the point of a pure believer, they credited Don Pedrito Jaramillo as having clairvoyance and psychic abilities, and he was often able to tell what people's issue was before they even got to him, or they told him whatever. But he, I guess, maybe in some sense knew that this woman would have an explosive reaction, we'll call it. And that was the cure, was to force her to have that reaction, and then in turn maybe release some sort of pressure, be it physical or mental or spiritual or a combination of those, that released her from those head. Kind of like when you pop your back really good and that release just feels good. Maybe something like that. He gave her a spiritual bone popping or something that got rid of those headaches. But I just thought it was funny that his cure was to piss her off. This next one is a collection of various cures. It says, at times, a man suffered from headache until he took to his bed. The remedy for him was that for 3 mornings he should get up at the same hour and drink a glass of water. He recovered in 3 days. That could also be dehydration. Because to this day, I hear of people that do not drink water. All they drink is sodas or coffees or just anything but water. And I'm just thinking, please have a glass of water. Everyone, hydrate or dihydrate. Seriously, please. It will help you a ton. So this one seems kind of obvious, right? But I mean, who knows? Maybe Don Pedro was able to tell this person does not drink water, so my prescription will be hydrate yourself for the love of God. It continues, for a sick girl, the remedy with which she was cured was that she take a bath every night for 9 nights, washing her head well with soap, then that she eat as much as she should want of a can of fruit or whatever kind was available, and place the remainder where only the chickens could find it. Interesting. Next says the prescription for a certain woman was to dip her head into a bucket of water as she was ready to go to bed. The next morning, she was to put half a can of tomatoes into each shoe, then put the shoes on and wear them that way all day. Sin vergüenza, without shame. I wonder what this remedy was for, though. Okay, so based on the things that we're seeing so far. So the first was to hydrate this person. The next was for a sick girl, was that she bathe, wash her head with soap, and she eat fruit. immediately my mind goes to scurvy. Maybe she wasn't getting enough vitamin C. If she's eating fruits, I'm thinking citruses, oranges. Oranges and citrus grows very well in the Rio Grande Valley or in southern Texas. Maybe it could be that. This, dip head in a bucket of water before bed, and then in the morning, wear your shoes with tomatoes in each of them. Okay, if any of you know healing properties or vitamins or enzymes, something that tomatoes have, I want to know what it is. I could also look it up, but I want you to tell. I'm going to look it up, and I want you to also tell me if you think of any before I am able to say it on here. Okay, this one says, studies suggest that they may ease inflammation, boost your immune system, lower your cholesterol levels, and keep your blood from clotting. Okay, those are some health benefits of tomatoes. So maybe this person, and this is me just trying to play the skeptic here and logically explain what some of these things might be, because who knows, maybe Don Pedrito had this divine knowledge. People thought it was seemingly just random remedies or prescriptions, but maybe he was tapped into this divine knowledge of holistic healing, of herbalism, as we discussed in the last episode, right? But yeah, so maybe this person then was suffering from some sort of inflammation or increased cholesterol levels, so they maybe felt their heart was off or something, and they told him that. Who knows? Okay, again, just trying to like play the skeptic and explain some of this. This next one says, a case of particular interest, it was said, was that of a Colonel Toribio Regalo, who was brought from the city of Torreon, Mexico. He was so violently insane that he was kept tied. Don Pedro prescribed a can of tomatoes every morning for 9 mornings. The man was confined at Los Olmos while he took the remedy. At the end of 9 days, he was well, and his friends took him back to Mexico. Okay, so again, it's tomatoes. Okay, so again, playing the skeptic, I'm thinking that this person was, quote, so violently insane, maybe because they had some very intense inflammation of the brain or in the skull. And so it was maybe pressing on a part of the brain that was making him act out in a way that was deemed, again, quote, violently insane. I don't know. Who knows? Apparently tomatoes, we're saving people's lives left and right out here. But again, just to reiterate, as was said earlier, is these prescriptions were given in the name of God with the intent of putting them to use with full faith. I'm just playing a part here. I do believe in the power that Don Pedrito Jaramillo had. And the final various remedy that I have here says, a man had a very fine horse that got sick. Don Pedrito told the man to tie the horse to a chinaberry tree at 12 o'clock sharp, and at 1 o'clock sharp to take him away from the tree. With this, the horse would get well and the chinaberry tree would die. Okay. Who knows what a chinaberry tree is? Because I don't. I've never heard of that. Commonly known as the chinaberry tree, pride of India, bee tree. It's a species of deciduous tree in the mahogany family. Interesting. This says, extracts from chinaberry tree have been studied for potential medicinal applications, including antibacterial, anti-malarial, anti-fertility, and antiviral properties. So this plant does have potential medicinal applications. So, okay, now part of me thinks, what if Don Pedro Jaramillo was an herbalist by way of divine, intervention or divine connection? Again, as I was kind of saying earlier, he was prescribing all these things, foods and stuff, and now apparently herbs. Maybe he was given a divine insight to herbalism. I don't know. This is interesting. This took an interesting turn for me because this now is sounding a lot like herbalism. Thoughts, concerns, questions? What do you all think? I'm going to continue to the final entry that I have here. This says, the night of the new moon. Felipe Lerma said that once he was sick without knowing what was the matter with him. At that time, Don Pedrito came to the town of Beeville in B County, where Felipe lived. He went to consult him. The curandero asked him what his sickness was. Felipe told him that he didn't know, only that he didn't feel well. Then Don Pedrito told him that what he had was susto, fright arising at a certain time and continuing afterwards so as to cause chronic sickness. If you don't want to tell the cause, Don Pedrito added, I shall tell you. There were 4 men together. One of them killed one of the others, and the dead man fell at your feet. At this your heart stopped, and from this resulted your sickness. And it was the truth that this had happened, Felipe said. Oh, I got chills. Don Pedrito gave him a remedy. On the night of the new moon, after he had eaten his supper and was about to go to bed, he should take a bottle of beer and empty it into a jarra, or some other vessel, and to drink it all at one draught. He should do this 3 times, each time on the night of the new moon. Felipe said that this remedy cured him of the fright. Okay, so right off the bat, I will never tell you all to drink your problems away. But I will say, after a few birongas, I do feel a little bit better about some things. Of course, I could not have done this without. I mean, once I saw the word susto, I said, that's it. I have to put that in. But that does remind me, this takes me kind of full circle before we wrap this up, is in part of the story, it says that the store merchant said that Don Pedrito was the only person that the merchant knew that ordered an entire barrel, I think was the word they said, of sugar cubes or sugar of some sort. And it reminds me of, or it made me wonder if he was using the sugar to remedy susto. I'm sure he used it for many other things and purely just to feed people because he had tons of visitors. But you all may have heard me say before, either on the show or when I've done events, that when I explain susto, I say there are different remedies based on which culture you're speaking to, even down to which community. And for me, growing up, my mom's remedy for susto was to mix a spoonful of sugar in a glass of water and dissolve it, and then whoever had the susto had to chug that, and that would, help. That would cure it. So yeah, it made me wonder when they mentioned that detail about him buying all that sugar. I thought, I wonder if he was using it to cure susto. And apparently, susto is something that he was curing. But, so many of these remedies were different for each person. So it couldn't have been that he was using, if you have susto sugar, obviously for this person, it was a whole ritual involving beer, even down to pouring the beer into a separate vessel versus just drinking it straight from the one that it came in. Who knows? But also beer has carbs. And if you remember Flavia Drago, who has been on the show before, she said that in 2017, when they had that earthquake in Mexico, the street vendors were giving out bread, bolillo, bread, carbs. And of course, also sugar is a carb. Maybe carbs are the secret. Okay, so those of you all who are carb free on your diets, allow yourself to break your diet if you have a case of susto. Apparently, bread is the answer. Olive Garden is doing the Lord's work with the bottomless breadsticks or whatever it is, endless breadsticks. We'll go ahead and wrap that there. Welcome back, Ghoul friends. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you're enjoying this series, if you will, of curanderismo and curanderes. I asked in the last episode if anybody was interested in me pursuing this, and I did get some good feedback from you all that you wanted me to do this. Again, I listen to your feedback, I look out for it, and I appreciate it. And if you would like to leave your own feedback on this episode, on previous episodes, or ideas for future episodes, you can do so by leaving it in a review on Apple Podcasts or leaving it on the Q&A portion of this episode on Spotify podcasts. You just got to scroll down and there's a box for that. Honestly, leave anything in there. And if you want to, you can just leave a rating or a review if you're feeling generous, because it is the easiest way to support the show. Make sure that you're sharing it with your ghoul friends, asking them to subscribe, just like I'm sure you did, right? Because if you haven't, a duende's gonna bite your ankles. I'm sorry. I don't make the rules, and I don't know how to stop them. If you are interested in other ways to support the show, you can always donate to the GoFundMe. As was mentioned earlier, you can visit gofund.me/10bcdc27. I am saving the money that I'm making from events, and I'm going to put that into the GoFundMe. That way we're all keeping track of where we're at with our goal. Any amount helps, and if you are unable to donate, that's fine. You can also share it with people, and that will also mean the world to me. If you're interested in subscribing consistently and with benefits, you can visit patreon.com/sustopodcast and become a patron. Speaking of, thank you so much to this episode's patrons. You all really make this haunted house a home, and I truly appreciate that. And you are Liza, Sadie, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, Mario, Eva, Dee, Josette, Sam, Angela and Co, Mandy, Jules, Lori, Jeannie, Desiree, Anna C, Ashes, Neressa, Rachel, Azucena, Rios, Anna, Marlene, Chata, Lainey, Desiree C, Aaliyah, Holly, Cynthia, Carla, and Lupe. Thank you all so much. I will talk to you in the next one. And until then, put your finger on your nose, and then put your other hand on your head. Stand on one foot, jump in a circle, do a split, and your cold will be gone in the morning. Bye!